There is no Shringasaurus, there is only Zool. Hello guys, and welcome back to the compound, where today we're going to be taking on the Mattel Jurassic World Shringasaurus. Now, I have to be honest with you, I have never in my life heard of this creature before. So when I first saw this figure, I just assumed that this is roughly what it looked like. And then I Googled images of it and quickly realized that this toy looks nothing like it at all. This actually looks more like a T-Rex and Shringasaurus hybrid, and it looks pretty cool, you know. But the way that it should actually have looked, I guess, it was redesigned by Aquarium Master over on Instagram, and they did like a redesign of it, and this one looks pretty cool, a little bit more accurate to the animal, but instead we got sort of a yellow terror dog looking thing, which I think is pretty cool, and it got me thinking that it would be a fun deco to do on this guy. So before I paint it, I need to prep the figure first, and the articulation is pretty simple on this, so there really isn't much to prep on it aside from the neck section. And this figure has this massive disc joint thing that will scrape the paint off the minute you go to move it, even if you varnish it. So in order to prevent that, we need to trim and sand down this disc just a little bit so it doesn't rub on the neck area. So first I'm going to heat the plastic up with my heat gun, so trimming it will be easier. And then I'll take my X-Acto knife and trim the neck section back, just making sure that the plastic clears it and is able to move freely without rubbing against the sides. Then I'll go in with some fine grit sandpaper and smooth all of my cuts down, so everything is nice and smooth pretty much and it's not rough looking. And then I'll take my Dremel and I'll go in using the ball grinder tip. I'm going to go in and start to grind down that disc joint, and you want to make sure that you sand the joint down so it sits below the outer plastic to ensure the upper area can't rub on it when it moves. And after that, I'm going to go in with a fine tip sanding bit, and I'll go in and clean up all the edges, and that should be enough to prevent any plastic on plastic rubbing. And you can apply this technique to any Mattel figure that has this type of joint. I'll then rub the figure down with some rubbing alcohol to get the grime off so the paint adheres better. And with all that done, all I need to do now is dye the disc joint. And for that, I'm going to use black ink. Since the figure will be primarily dark color, the dye joint will blend in better with the rest of the deco, and I'll be able to move it around without having to worry about the paint rubbing off. So I'm taking the ink and I'm dropping it down into the joint and letting it soak into the plastic. And then I'll move the joint back and forth, making sure to work the ink down into the hard to reach areas. I'll then take my heat gun and dry the ink and then dab off any excess that's running around. I recommend using gloves since the ink will most definitely stain your hands and any surface that you're doing it on, so make sure you've got some protection down. That way things that you really care about don't get stained black or whatever color ink that you're using. Now with all those shenanigans done, I can go ahead and finally prime and base coat him in all black. And you can do this with an airbrush or by hand, just whatever works for you and the setup you have. So now that I've got the base skin tone down, it's time to go in and start to dry brush this guy. This technique will work with any color. Just start with black and then work your way up from the darkest color to the lightest one you're using. For this video, since I'm going for more of a terror dog gargoyle vibe, I want to use grays for this. So I'm going to start off with 4 different shades of gray: a dark gray, a medium light gray, and then a final light gray for the very last highlight color. So this is dry brushing basics. Just get some paint on your brush, wipe it all off, and then quickly and lightly hit the figure in all the directions, hitting all of the raised areas. And you'll repeat this step for all 4 colors, dry brushing the figure with lighter and lighter pressure, the brighter that you get with the colors. And always start with very little paint on your brush. You can kind of get an eye for how much paint is coming off, and you don't have to attack it with just a ton of paint at first. And just hitting the raised areas really lightly is the key here to making all of the details pop. So with the body done, now I'm going to jump in and blast out the rest of the paint apps. So I'm going to hit the horns with a beige color and then just apply a couple of thin coats to ensure a nice smooth finish. And then I'll paint the claws a medium gray. And since he stands on all fours, I want to make sure that the paint doesn't scrape off of the claws. So here's a little tip to help prevent that. Get an old water bottle cap and put some super glue in it, and then get some really cheap paintbrushes. These are from Walmart and they're like 98 cents for this entire pack. And these brushes are terrible for painting with, but they work great for applying super glue. So I'll just apply a very thin layer of super glue on the top and bottom of the claws and then speed dry it with my heat gun. It is important that the super glue is completely cured before you set this figure down, or else it will super glue itself to your work surface area and you don't want that. So make sure the super glue is cured. You can use a heat gun, hair dryer, or just the old-fashioned blow on it until you run out of breath method, whatever works for you. So with all that done, now I'm going to paint the jaw flaps, mouth, and gum line with a flesh tone. To get this particular color, I like to mix beige with a little bit of red together. It just creates a real nice, warm, fleshy, all-purpose mouth color. Then I'll take a little off-white and carefully paint the teeth, and then seal the mouth with the super glue technique I showed you earlier. This will ensure no paint rubs off while I'm opening and closing the mouth. Now it's time to take a big deep breath together, and I'm going to grab some scarlet red and attempt to paint these tiny little eyes without shaking all over the place like the washing machine on the spin cycle. The last little detail I'm going to do is wash the horns in a shade wash, and I'm using Army Painter's Zombie Shade, and you can use Citadel Nuln Oil, I think that's what it's called, but it's a shade wash, and that'll work great. You can also just thin down black acrylic paint with some water, and you can do it on the cheap that way, but I always recommend at least grabbing one pre-made bottle of wash. It just kind of takes the thinking out of it, and you don't have to worry about mixing your own. So with all that done, the Shringasaurus Rex was looking really good, but I thought to myself, how can I take this to the next level? So aside from the Jurassic franchise, I'm also a big post-apocalyptic fan. I love stuff like the Fallout games and Mad Max and The Walking Dead. So I thought this creature would look pretty awesome decked out in some post-apocalyptic survival gear. So I threw together a collar and chain and a harness with some storage gear on it, along with a rifle holster to really sell the whole Jurassic World apocalypse vibe. So I really like the character Michonne from The Walking Dead, who uses two zombies on leashes as camouflage to blend in with the other walkers. So I sort of took inspiration from that design to use alongside the female character that I use a lot in my survival horror photos over on Instagram, and I think it turned out really awesome. So I had a ton of fun with this custom, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video and you learned something or have been inspired to create your own post-apocalyptic Jurassic World characters. If you create your own, remember to tag me over on Instagram at the Jurassic Park Compound, because I always love to see what you guys can come up with. For more Jurassic related content, you know where to find me. Links will be in the description box below. You guys take care, and I'll see you around the compound.